Way up in the far north of Russia, right near the Arctic Circle, there's this old, rusted metal cap just bolted to the ground. It really doesn't look like much. But what's underneath it? Well, that's a hole that goes down more than 12 kilometers. This is the story of the Kola Super Deep Borehole.
So that's the big question, isn't it? For decades, this thing was one of the Soviet Union's biggest, most secret scientific projects. After all that work, what did they actually find at the bottom of the world? The answers were, well, they were a lot stranger and for some people, way more terrifying than anyone could have possibly imagined.
Now, before we get into the real science, we have to talk about the myth. Because as word of this crazy project started to leak out, this bizarre rumor caught on, that the Soviets hadn't just drilled into rock. Oh no, they had drilled a hole straight into hell.
So, Section 1. A hole to hell? We're going to dig into the legend of the Kola Super Deep Borehole. This story, which is a total fabrication by the way, spread like wildfire in the late 80s and 90s. It tapped into this really primal fear we all have about what could be lurking deep beneath our feet.
But let's bring it back to reality for a second. This object right here, this is what's at the center of the whole myth. It's just a simple industrial cap, sealing a hole so incredibly deep it would take you hours to fall to the bottom. It's really a monument to one of the most amazing engineering feats in human history.
Okay, on to Section 2, the race to depth, because the real story wasn't about demons or hellfire. It was about beating the competition. This was a full-on Cold War mission, but instead of going to space, they were going into the Earth.
You know, while America was looking up at the stars, it was also looking down. The US kicked things off with something called Project Mohole back in '57. The Soviets answered in 1970 with Kola. And, well, by the late '70s, they had completely taken the lead in this geological space race, pushing deeper than anyone had ever gone before.
And what's really interesting here is the totally different strategies. The US tried drilling through the ocean floor, where the crust is thinner, but that was super complex and incredibly expensive. The Soviets, they chose to go through the much thicker continental crust on land. And in the end, the American project got scrapped and the Soviets drilled their way right into the history books.
So, they won the race. Awesome. But what did they find down there? Section 3, an alien world below. This, my friends, is where the story gets truly fascinating, because the reality was so much stranger than any myth.
I mean, the discoveries were just staggering. They found microscopic fossils of plankton from 2 billion years ago, perfectly preserved in rock that had been under insane heat and pressure. They found water, not water seeping down, but water that had been trapped inside the Earth's crust for ages. And maybe wildest of all, the very structure of the Earth. It wasn't what they thought it was at all. Okay, so here's the key thing you need to know. Geologists had this model of the Earth, and it had a clear, sharp dividing line between the crust and the mantle. It's called the moho. They were drilling down, fully expecting to hit it, but they never did. Instead of some neat boundary, they found this chaotic, fractured, messy zone. It basically forced them to rethink how our entire planet is put together. Which leads us right into Section 4, the Earth pushes back. Because as you're about to see, the deeper they drilled, the harder the planet itself seemed to fight them. Look at that number. 12,262 meters. That's over 40,000 feet. To this day, it is the deepest artificial point on Earth. That record has stood for decades.
But here was the problem, the showstopper. At that depth, the temperature hit 180 degrees Celsius. That's about 356 Fahrenheit. And that was almost double what their scientific model said it would be. And at that temperature, everything, and I mean everything, changes.
So here's the challenge they faced. The rock itself stopped being solid. It became more like a dense, superheated plastic. It would literally flow and squeeze the hole closed right behind the drill. Equipment was constantly failing. The drill bits were softening in the insane heat. It wasn't some monster that stopped them. It was just physics.
And that gets us to the absolute core of this whole story, the real, terrifying truth. Because the scariness of the Kola Super Deep Borehole has nothing to do with hellfire and everything to do with what it showed us about our own world.
You see, the myth was simple. We poked a hole where we shouldn't have, and we heard screams. But the reality is so much more profound. We discovered that the very ground beneath our feet is not this solid, predictable thing we imagine. It's a chaotic, alien world we barely understand. The real fear isn't what we found. It's realizing what we don't know. This right here, this is the single most important thing to wrap your head around.
for all that incredible effort, for breaking all those records. Humanity's deepest journey into our own planet amounts to less than piercing the skin of an apple.
And this chart just drives that point home. All of our mines, our tunnels, our boreholes, everything, it barely scratches the surface. Over 99% of our planet's mass is completely inaccessible, and frankly, a giant mystery to us. We live on the thinnest possible shell of a world we know almost nothing about.
So finally, what is the legacy of this project? The Kola Super Deep Borehole is really two things at once. It's both a monument and a mirror. It shows us the absolute height of our ambition and, at the same time, the humbling truth of our limits.
On one hand, it's a monument to our relentless drive to just know, right? A testament to the idea that no challenge is too great when we're trying to learn something new. But on the other hand, it's a mirror. It reflects just how small we are, and how the deeper we probe, the stranger and more alien our own home actually becomes.
So the project was abandoned, the site is in ruins today, and the hole is sealed up for good. But the real legacy is the question it leaves us with. We pushed our technology to its absolute limit and found an environment so hostile and strange it broke all our models. It just makes you wonder, what other surprises are waiting just beyond our reach? What secrets lie in kilometer 13?